Hello and welcome to This Week at Charlestown Road, a branch of the Heaven Bound podcast. My name is Jason Harden. I'm here with Roger Schaus, and this is where we reflect on the weekend that was. We dig a little deeper into a recent sermon to give you something to think about as this week unfolds and preview what's to come this next weekend at Charlestown Road. Roger, it is one of the most famous stories ever told, even as people perhaps have never read the Bible. They know the phrase, the prodigal son, that is used in all different kinds of contexts. Many could at least tell elements of the story. But this past Sunday, you took us not just to the story, but you encouraged us to think beyond that parable. What might have happened the next day?
Yeah, again, it is probably one of the greatest stories Jesus told. And what makes it so alive is what Luke is doing here through the words of Jesus is he's painting a picture for us of what God looks like. And rather than being a mean ogre, someone who's got a whip in hand, we see this compassionate father that runs and embraces his son who has just wasted everything, is worthless, but the father embraces him. He calls for the best robe to be put on, a ring on his hand, sandals on his feet, to have a feast and a celebration. There's music, there's dancing, there's just a lot of joy. It's a story about coming home to God. It's a story about forgiveness. Powerful, powerful story. In these words, we see ourselves. We are the prodigal. There are opportunities in our lives where we can be like the father and we can forgive others. And sadly, there's times when we're like the older brother. We got our arms crossed, we're standing outside, and we refuse to have a part of that. But when you think about the story, and of course the point of all this was to answer the charge at the beginning of Luke 15, why do you eat with sinners? This is why Jesus is telling the story. This is his answer to that charge. But we stretch it just a little bit farther and we think, okay, what would have happened on the next day? What would have happened? The music stops. The feast has been eaten. All the friends have gone home. Now it's the next day. The father was still there. The obnoxious brother was still there. Temptation still hanging in the air. What happens? And that's kind of what this sermon was all about. And we looked at four essential things that took place. Number one, the next day, the prodigal had to live with the past. He had a past, and he came home, and it wasn't a happy occasion for him because of what he had done. And he had to live with that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Secondly, he had to learn his new identity. He came home asking the father to make him a servant, but by the father's actions, he really was a son. And number three, the next day, he had to begin some new habits. What took him away had to change, and he had to develop some new spiritual habits. And then fourthly, as we kind of brought into the sermon, he had to face old relationships, and part of that was his brother. He came home to his father, but his brother was still there too, and he had to deal with that. And so when we think about the challenges of the next day, that's before us. We have a great, great meeting, a great celebration, a great moment in our life. And then we got to get back to the routine. We got to get back to the next day and what happens there.
Yeah, and this is such a powerful exercise thinking about, because of course our theme here at Charlestown Road throughout 2026 is the joy of the journey, and we have split up the various quarters. As hard as it is to believe, we are very, very at the tail end of the first entire quarter of this year, and our focal point this quarter has been our journey with the Lord, right? And so as this quarter wraps up, all right, a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of study, a lot of discussion has gone into this journey with the Lord. But Roger, it strikes me here in the middle of the week, these four things, that is our story. Like you said, in so many different ways. The wrapping paper might look a little different. Some of the nuances, the details of the past might look a little bit different. But why don't we spend a few minutes just thinking through these 4 powerful points and how much they relate to us and how we can go through this process that we might find this joy in the journey. So whomever I am, whoever is listening to this episode today, we all have a past that we have to live with. What do we need to be aware of here in the middle of the week on that front?
Well, I imagine that prodigal waking up the next morning in a bed, not in a pig pen, probably wearing clean clothes for the first time in months. On the edge of the bed, there's a robe, the best robe. He lifts his hand up, and there's a big old ring on his finger. At the foot of the bed, there are some sandals that belong to his father. His belly is full of food from the night before, and he's thinking, man, this is better than it ever could be. But he also remembers what he has done and how he's broken his father's heart and how he's ruined the family name. But by the actions of the father, he's showing him here that you are forgiven. And so with this point, we have to realize there are consequences that can linger even though God has forgiven you. You can get forgiveness, but you still may lose your license. You can get forgiveness, but you may lose the job. You can get forgiveness, but the relationship may break up. And so there are consequences, and other people may remember. We never refer to this story as the repentant son. If I was to begin this lesson by saying, let's turn our Bibles to the repentant son, half the audience, if not more, would be looking at me and saying, what are you talking about? But when I say prodigal, oh yeah, we all know what that is, Luke 15. And so he's forever known as the prodigal, even though most of the story, he's not a prodigal. He's back home and doing what's right. And so forgiveness can be very hard. How we deal with this is we're not to live with guilt. We're to remember the life that God has forgiven us. We are to forgive ourselves. That's one of the hardest lessons to do, is to forgive ourselves. And so, yes, there's a past there, but the past should teach us things. It should remind us, I made a mistake and I shouldn't have gone down that road. Next time Satan comes knocking, I'm going to recognize this and not open that door. And so with that, it can help us become stronger because of those things.
Yeah, we have these beautiful promises in the Bible, right? Psalm 103, verses 11 and 12 comes to mind. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. If God has forgiven me, I need to rest in that. I need to rejoice in that. I need to cling to that. I need to use that as an opportunity to honor and glorify him and share him with everything that I have for the rest of my days. But as you mentioned, consequences may linger for the rest of my life. And so in many ways, it is an already but not yet sort of scenario where I have laid down the weight of sin, but I may carry scars of that sin for the rest of my life. Even then, though, is an opportunity to tell others how much the Lord has done for me, right? So foundational point number 1, that prodigal son had a past that he had to live with for the rest of his life. Number 2, he had to learn his new identity. What do we need to think about here in the middle of the week about that?
Well, to remind ourselves that we are children of God. The Bible calls it that several places. In 1 John 3, verse 1, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. Instead of feeling like a failure, an outsider, a loser, he was the son of his father. And the father wanted him sitting at the table in that house around him. And so that's what we got to remind ourselves. We can hang on that past, and that can keep us from excelling as God wants us to. It can keep us back from where we should be. So to understand, he needs to believe as the Father said that. We need to believe as the Father forgives us that we are forgiven. And we need to see that I am a child of God. I am heaven bound. What a beautiful, beautiful relationship that is. And to see how wonderful that is.
Yes. So, number 3, the next day he began to build new habits. And I think that just builds right where you were, right? With a new identity come new habits.
Yeah, he had to start thinking differently. No more reckless living, no more wild living, no more thinking only of himself. Coming home is a moment, but staying home is a lifestyle. And that's what he had to do. He had to develop that lifestyle of, I want to be home. When he walked out that door, he wanted freedom. He wanted to be away from his dad, away from the rules, and no one to boss me around. He came back broken, understanding, I need to be under your rule. I need your guidance, and I need that. So one of the first things we see is there's a major shift in thinking. And again, that happens to each of us. We've got to drive out the self in us, and we have to see that. Then there's a change of behavior. Daily doing things, daily searching the scriptures, daily talking to God, praying without ceasing. Those things are just important to that. And then he had to change his relationship with his father. Rather than wanting to be away from his father, he had to want to be with his father. And walking away and walking with. There's a big difference in that, and that's what he had to do.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciated in the sermon, you emphasized, we've got to be realistic. Just because you come home, you said, don't think everything will be fine. The problems that made you leave don't just evaporate away, but if we're not working to address those things, if we don't change our thinking, if we don't change our behavior, Roger, you highlighted that if nothing changes, it very well may not be long before the prodigal goes off to the far country again.
Absolutely. And so the father wasn't changing, and obviously the older brother wasn't changing. So what had to change had to be the inside of the prodigal. I used this illustration. A friend of all places at a pitch-in or a potluck, he showed me this app while we were eating, and it says, if every day were like today, in a year you'd weigh this much. And it's based on the calories you're eating this.
Oh boy!
Of course, he showed me this as I'm eating some pie. And so, if every day were like today, based on the calories you're eating right now, in a year you'd weigh so much. Well, what if we flip that spiritually? If every day were like today, would I worry? If every day were like today, would I be more spiritual? If every day were like today, would I be more thoughtful? And so, when we think about this journey to heaven, it's not one major thing we do, but it's the little choices every single day that make the difference. And it begins with new habits. Doing the same things over and over again to get us closer to the Lord.
All right, one more next day point. He had to face old relationships.
That's the brother. Angry, unforgiving, refusing to accept any relationship. So he wasn't just coming home to the father. He couldn't say, I'm coming home to you, Father, but get rid of my brother. The brother was going to be there. And we have to realize that not everybody's going to forgive me like God will. Not everybody's going to accept me like God will. Not everybody's going to give me a second chance. There may be some difficult conversations that take place. There may be some awkward looks. There may be some tension in the air. But I cannot let the actions of others keep me from coming to my Father. That's what the prodigal had to realize. His brother didn't like him, but he still had to overcome that to come home to his Father. And so there may be some in your family that don't like you walking with Jesus. There may be some at work that do not like you walking with Jesus. You cannot let others determine your outcome and your walk. You have to overcome those things and continue walking. Remain humble. Be patient and be faithful to God. That's the key.
Yeah, it strikes me that the emphasis of the sermon, of course, was on that wayward, wasteful son. But he wasn't the only one who had a next day, right? In Luke chapter 15, there are 3 lost parables. We've got a sheep that is lost, and Jesus provides an end to that parable. We've got a lost coin, and Jesus provides the end But Roger, it has always been fascinating to me that Luke 15, this parable, like you said, that we call the parable of the prodigal son, is just left with a cliffhanger. Here is the father at the end of the parable pleading with the older brother, come in, celebrate with us. My son, your brother who was lost has been found. This brother of yours who was as good as dead is alive again. And then the parable ends, right? And we are left wondering, okay, what was the next day like for the prodigal younger brother? What was the next day like for the older brother? Both of them, to the good point of this sermon, were going to have choices ahead of them. And I think that's one of the powerful things about a sermon like this is it leaves it at our front porch and emphasizes we also have pivotal choices to make.
Absolutely. And so, and in many ways, we all have a next day. If it's not on this side of life, it's on the next side of life. And so what we do today can shape that next day. And so hopefully this was helpful. It's on our podcast and on our Facebook page and a lot of places like that, our website. And so it's just a wonderful reminder as we look at scriptures to remind ourselves that there's always a journey and we got to keep walking with the Lord.
Absolutely. And there is joy to be found in this journey, right? We are 2 days away from the start of a very special spring series that we've been talking about, looking forward to for a long time. Roger, your son Jordan is going to come. He is no stranger to this church family. In many ways, he grew up here. He was a trainee here. We've had him back many times. He's going to be talking with us throughout the weekend about the joy of the journey. You haven't missed anything yet. It kicks off on Friday, March 27th at 7 o'clock p.m. Jordan will be talking about the joy of right thinking. This Saturday, 7 o'clock p.m., the joy of knowing the truth. Sunday, March 29th, 9:30 a.m., what a great way to start the week, focused on the joy of worship. 10:45 a.m., the joy of a lasting legacy. And 5 o'clock p.m., the joy in reaching the end. We would love to have you join us this weekend. Many of us are looking forward to that. In the meantime, Roger, thank you for serving us so well this past Sunday. Again, the sermon the next day is freely available at charlestownroad.org. Thanks to all of you for listening to This Week at Charlestown Road. We're already looking forward to Sunday, the best day of the week, and we would love to have you come and grow with us.